Let's bring it back to the studio now and my guests. I want to go back to some of the historic parallels. We've talked a bit about President Bush, and I'm sure there's lots more to say, but back to some of the historic parallels. Much has been made of the connection with Lincoln, but would perhaps a connection to Franklin D. Roosevelt be a little bit more appropriate at such a time? The man who, after all, took over at the time of the Great Depression.
Yes, there are obvious parallels. There are parallels to Franklin Roosevelt, there are parallels to Kennedy, there are parallels to Wilson, there are parallels to Lincoln, and even to Lyndon Johnson. This is what makes Obama such a powerful figure, is that in the history of the presidency, he has this ability to offer a kind of figure upon which we can hang so many hats. I think the relationship to FDR is something that he has cultivated along with the relationship to Lincoln. He's done that in large part to try to drive home the notion of a crisis, and that he is there to resolve the crisis. And, of course, FDR being a president in both wartime and financial crisis helps that to build that credibility. It's also, to some extent, an issue that one needs to be aware of. FDR is the one who develops the executive office of the president. He does expand the administrative power of the executive office far beyond anything that had ever been imagined previously. And this is going to be a major issue for Barack Obama. To what extent he is going to continue the tradition of George Bush and the tradition that has developed since especially since the 1960s, of an expansion of presidential power, an expansion of the executive office, and use that to solve these problems, or to what extent he is going to decide that he wants to some extent, have increased legislative control over American politics. This is going to be a major issue of this presidency, and it ties directly back to the legacy of FDR.
All right. I'll stop you there because I think we can go back to Washington and to Robert Parsons, who's standing overlooking these events. Robert, we're seeing various pictures, and it does look as if dignitaries, world leaders are arriving at the Capitol for the ceremonies which will be taking place in a short time, of course. Those the swearing in of the Vice President-elect Joe Biden and Barack Obama.
That's right. You know, the people have been gathering already since 9 o'clock this morning here. The VIPs arrive fairly early on, former presidents, for instance, but also the wives of the outgoing president and vice president have been taking their seats. But the expectation now is building up because obviously, you know, there's little time now before President Bush and the incoming president, Barack Obama, get into that limousine and drive the short distance from the White House to the Capitol, and things really get underway in earnest. First of all, with the swearing in of Vice President Joe Biden, and then after that, Barack Obama himself at 12 o'clock local time, and then the speech, a 20-minute speech, which will be, for many people, I imagine, the highlight of the day. If one can't say that the day itself, I suppose, for many people, just being here is the highlight. But the excitement will certainly be mounting as we get to that point.
Well, Rob, we are seeing extraordinary pictures there from Washington, and you can see the streets lined with people. Up to 2 million people are expected in the Capitol. I'm sure most of them are there right now. Many have been out in the streets since dawn in the cold, waiting for a glimpse of the President-elect Barack Obama on this most historic of days, the days that he will be sworn in to the highest office in the United States. And there you can see the dignitaries gathered on the Capitol. For now, the President-elect is in the White House with his wife and the President George W. Bush and his wife. They're having a traditional coffee before they'll make their way to the Capitol for that ceremony. As the music stops, I'll bring it back to the studio and Erik Svane. Erik, Barack Obama has had an enormous appeal, to Republicans, to many Republicans. Why do you think that's so?
Well, again, part of it is he speaks very well. Of course, we know that already. They also are very attracted by the idea of electing an African American for the first time as President of the United States. But I don't think that should make us forget that the president who had the most diverse cabinet ever, and nobody knows about this, of course, because too many people were busy demolishing him, was George W. Bush. Both women and blacks and Hispanics and everything. And that's something we don't know about because it would give a good image of George W. Bush, and so we don't...
Condoleezza Rice.
Of course.
Colin Powell.
Etc. I just hope, I agree with you that there may be, and we see FDR, Abraham Lincoln and all that. We must just hope that we don't see too much of Jimmy Carter in Barack Obama, because there are also parallels there. Back in '76, we saw an unknown president speaking of hope and change with a big smile, very Prince Charming, arrive at the White House. He wanted to solve everything, say America had no real enemies, we should just talk to everybody. And 4 years later, of course, Reagan came in because he had made a shambles of that. Apart from a couple of victories, there had been a lot of, among other things, the fact that Iran is now under the mullahs, because he was telling the Shah, we will not help support you anymore. You're not very democratic. Iran is not democratic. The Shah was overthrown. Now we have the mullahs, and Iran is a worse dictatorship than it was back then, and it's the worst danger for the world as well. So let's just hope that Barack Obama is another FDR or Abraham Lincoln and not another Jimmy Carter.
All right, Erik Svane, let me just leave it there for a moment, because we are going to just listen to the band there as we go into our news break. But just a reminder that you're watching Frans van Kat's live special coverage of the inauguration ceremonies in Washington. President-elect Barack Obama will be sworn in shortly. Stay with us. On the ground, we've got Frans van Kat's, I should say, Catherine Galloway. She's joining us from the crowds in the mall, speaking to people to get some of their opinions and their feelings and their thoughts for the day. We've also got Rob Parsons, who's joining us from a rooftop. He's got a rooftop view overlooking the Capitol, and he's keeping us abreast of events. Well, there you can see a map. Freedom Plaza, that's where our correspondents are, Freedom Plaza and the Voice of America. And there, that line that you can see, if you move from the right to the left, that's actually how the inauguration parade will be going a little bit later. So after the president-elect is sworn in, he'll be embarking on the traditional parade. It's a day steeped in tradition, steeped in pomp and ceremony. Well, with me in the studio, I have from Republicans Abroad, Erik Svane, and I also have with me Stephen Sawyer, who's from the American University in Paris, and we've been talking through the day. And there you can see more people arriving there in Washington. Well, just before we went to the break, we were talking about Bush's legacy, and we were also, of course, looking forward to Barack Obama's presidency. And Erik Svane, you made the comparison. You said that you hoped that Barack Obama wouldn't be a Jimmy Carter. I think, Stephen Sawyer, you wanted to pick him up on that.
Yes, I think the question of Jimmy Carter is obviously an issue. We have the fact that Jimmy Carter was the last Democratic president to really make strong inroads into the South. Clinton did that to some extent, but Jimmy Carter did extremely well. And Obama also, that is obviously what allowed him to have such a victory was his victories in the South, which were surprising to many and definitely essential to his victory. There are some differences, though. There are some obvious differences with Carter. The first, Carter is known for not having, just take one obvious, Obama has already established that he is going to be out in the streets in Washington. He's going to be interacting with the people. He's going to try to be living the life of Washington and getting out there. Carter was not somebody who did that. Carter was somebody who was more reserved and did not have a tendency to be out there trying to meet the people. So there is that fundamental issue of Obama's just charisma and his desire to be out meeting the people. There's also the issue of Reagan, which is mentioned. Reagan had just barely lost to Ford in the primaries in 76, and it was when he came back in 1980, he had such a tremendous momentum behind him. And there is something to say for that. Jimmy Carter might not have won against Reagan in '76. Ford was not a terribly popular president, and that did help to help Carter to come in. And Reagan came in later. We obviously do not have that type of a situation. One does not expect John McCain to be back in 4 years, building on the momentum that wasn't there even already. So I think there are some fundamental differences in spite of what one might see otherwise.